On today's episode of The Perfect Route, we're joined by Angie Sanders, who's had an interesting career journey from two well-established companies to a family-owned business that is building a culture of learning through their leadership development programs. Let's take a walk down the perfect route. Welcome, Angie. How are you doing today?
Hi, Bill. Thank you for having me. I'm doing really well.
It is a pleasure to have you on The Perfect Route.
Thank
And
you.
um, let's start at the beginning. What pulled you into the world of learning and development, and how has your perspective on the field changed over time?
I have a pretty fun origin story. So I was going to school to be a teacher, and I was working at Bank of America at the time, and a training position came open, and one of my friends came to me and they were like, "Hey, this training position is open. You should apply for that." And I thought, oh, well, that'll give me some good experience before, I'm still in college and uh, want to get some experience before I go into teaching. So I applied for the role and I got it. And the first time that I stepped into the classroom, I just thought to myself, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do for the rest of my career. I want to teach adults. I don't want to teach kids. You don't have to deal with parents, and like I can actually make a career out of this. And from then on, so that was 1998. And from then on, I have been in the learning space. So I was a trainer for about 5 years, decided that I wanted to lead training teams. And I had had a little bit of leadership experience before then, but not much. And I had gone in and I was looking at posts and trying to, figure out how much leadership experience I needed. And I needed about 2 years. So being in banking, I went back to the retail bank. So I left training for a minute and went back to the retail bank, was a branch manager for a couple of years. And literally at the 2 year mark, I could not wait to get back into training. So I started applying for roles and got my first training supervisor position. And then I stayed in banking for about 10 years doing operational training. And after about 10 years, I moved to
Mhm.
Southwest Airlines, and started doing development training. And so, kind of my background in operational training and then moving into development training, I led their leadership and employee development training for about 10 years and then moved into the talent management space. I left Southwest a couple of months ago, and now I'm at a company called Andrews Distributing, and we distribute beer and spirits throughout Texas, and I'm the director of learning and development.
Excellent. You've worked at two classic companies,
Yeah.
Bank of America and Southwest, and I'm so excited to hear about your new opportunity with Andrews.
Yeah.
One thread that seems to be running through all three companies is there's a heavy emphasis on compliance in banking,
Mhm.
the airline industry, and in alcohol distribution.
Yeah.
Does that color or change the delivery with the leadership development programs?
You know, um, I think every organization has some kind of compliance that they have to deal with. Of course, in banking and in the airline industry, there's a lot of government regulations that you have to comply with, and so I have experienced where it is super important that, like, as you're teaching leadership development content to leaders, that you're helping them to understand the management aspect of their job and not teaching those two things separate,
Hmm.
because especially frontline leaders, they don't always make the connection of, hey, I'm learning this management aspect or compliance aspect of my job. And then I have this, how to have crucial conversations, or how to coach over here in the leadership development side. If we don't put those two things together for them and say, here's when you have a compliance issue and you have to have a crucial conversation, how do those two things fit together? So, uh, I think that's something that I've learned over the course of my career, and keeping those things separate doesn't work the way that we think it should. And so putting them together is super important.
It's a great set of skills to have in one's toolbox, and
Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear that um, working with those skills has worked out for you.
Yeah.
My previous background in corporate learning and development, my first gig didn't really have anything in compliance because it was the Wild West days of the internet.
Yes.
And then my last gig at a human services agency, lots of compliance training. And
Yeah.
my experience mirrors yours. You've got to provide context, and if anything, the compliance issues provide a ready set of examples
Right.
to discuss. There's a shared world of experiences in the classroom, which
Right.
is really helpful to see. And my experience as a business coach makes me curious. How did you approach coaching in the training?
You know, so coaching, I think, is a skill set that leaders don't get enough development on. We give a lot of development around how to have crucial conversations, how to give feedback, but not necessarily around how do I coach them to do better in the future. And so that is something both at Southwest Airlines and with at Andrews that I'm heavily focused on. And at Andrews, we actually call our leaders coaches. That is their
Hmm.
title. And so when I got here, there wasn't really a learning and development function at Andrews. And so when I got here, the first question I asked was like, we call our leaders coaches. Have we ever trained them how to actually coach? And they're like, no, we haven't. And so that's one of my priorities now is how do we equip them to coach well and really even just understand what it is. And one of the things that I found is like leaders don't really understand the difference between coaching, mentoring, feedback, and when to use each of those tools. So that is going to be one of my main focuses here.
Excellent. It sounds like such a great opportunity to
Yeah.
not only build a leadership and development program, but add value right from the start.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's so awesome to hear. Um, so you've already covered a little bit of my next question about what the learning function at Andrews looks like. And where does it sit in the broader organization? Are you part of HR? Are you sitting on your own?
Yeah, we do sit with HR, and our HR is a small but mighty team of 20 people. So on my team, I have two people that grew up in the business and were put into learning and development just because they had an interest in it. And so I think one of my objectives over the next 6 to 12 months is skilling them up
Hmm.
in the learning and development function. They are very knowledgeable about the business. Um, and so I did grow up in learning and development. So I think using their knowledge and skill in knowing the business and then my experience from learning and development, we're just going to kind of cross train each other on how we can build the learning function. But Andrews has about 2,000 employees, and so we've got frontline people who are out distributing the beer all the way to our executive and our e-team. So um, for three people to help to support the learning and development and really create a learning culture
Hmm.
within that's our end goal is to create a learning culture within the company.
And that's so important. I always find that culture affects the strategy,
Yes.
and vice versa too.
Yes.
But you've got a great opportunity to extend the work that they've already done on a learning culture,
Right.
and really, bring it to the next level or even the level above that.
Yeah.
That is that
Well,
is an exciting opportunity.
and that's one of the reasons that I chose to come here was because our executives, like something that was super important to me when I was choosing where I was going to go next, was that our executives were excited about learning and development, that they were committed to it, that they wanted to put their money where their mouth was. And I've seen that so far here. Something else that was really important to me was like I wanted a population that was hungry for development
Hmm.
and that could see the value in the work that my team was doing. So, and then lastly, just like having a great culture. So, you've heard probably that Southwest Airlines has an amazing culture, that it's a people focused, people first focused culture. And Andrews is very much the same way.
Hmm.
And so having a people focused culture, partnering that with learning and development makes my job so much easier.
Wow. I love that parallel between um, the Southwest and Andrews.
Hmm.
And it's exciting to hear about people-centered cultures. Where does skill building fit in all of this beyond the leadership skills?
Yeah. Uh, well, I think it's interesting that, in working with my talent management peer, so the person who runs talent management, we're really just at the very beginning of building out what our skills, what skills even do we need. And I
Hmm.
think there are a lot of companies that are in that space of, there's this whole new skills thing that's coming out. Like, where do we start? What do we do? Um, and I think we're just starting very small and we're
Hmm.
starting with one group of people and we're going to say, okay, what skills does this group need? We're actually starting with our sales team. What skills does this group need? What do we already have that we can apply to those skills? And then figuring out where the gap is and going to create a sales training strategy to figure that out.
Okay.
So we're at the very beginning. And, I think with smaller to mid-sized companies, building that muscle takes time.
Hmm.
And, coming in as a new person and kind of seeing things with fresh eyes, one of the gaps that I've found is that just around documentation and
Hmm.
like even having documentation around what each person's role is and what the expectation is, and then process policy and procedure around how we do that. There are some gaps there. So kind of building the infrastructure or the foundation and the places where we are more mature, starting on some of those skills conversations.
And there's always that feedback loop between learning and development and SOPs. Um, Over time, how do you feel that that feedback loop is going to work, especially being part of HR?
Yeah. Well, we're having conversations right now around where does that function even sit because it doesn't exist today. So, does it fit within our HR group or maybe a different group that has more of the skill set to be able to document some of those things?
Hmm.
But I think it's super important, as we build it out, that we identify who's the owner of it, and then figure out what that feedback loop does look like. Uh, and, we're not a very governance heavy company. We don't have a whole lot of governance, but
Hmm.
I do think SOPs need some form of governance so that as changes happen, there is a communication mechanism that notifies people and can update the documents, and then we can update the training. So,
Yeah, in that environment, it seems to me that there's a fair amount of course correction that has to happen. Compared to some places like Southwest or Bank of America, where
yes,
the SOPs are much more clearly
yes,
defined, the expectations are there, and the
yes,
course corrections may be subtle,
yes.
unless there's a major shift in policy.
Yes. And I think that's probably one of the biggest differences. This is the first time that I've worked at a smaller, privately owned company. I've always worked for very large public companies. And so making that transition coming into a smaller, privately owned company, there are a lot of benefits in that there is a lot. less bureaucracy.
Hmm.
But I think one of the opportunities is just maturing in a way that sets us up for success.
Hmm. Um, before you got there at Andrews, uh, would you characterize the learning and development function as more of a service provider?
Um, yeah, I would say that they did some service providing. It was the team was mostly focused on compliance and what compliance training was required, and using a learning platform to be able to deliver on the compliance training. And no fault of their own, the team that was, working in learning and development just didn't have the context of the broader, like, adult learning theory and some of the tools that are out there to help you do learning better. And so I think as I've come in, those are some of the gaps that I've seen, is like we can have some really quick wins
Hmm.
really early on, just applying some basic adult learning theories.
Hmm. Yeah, spinning up the flywheel is always fun.
Yes.
Yes. And you've got some lovely continuous improvement opportunities that
Yeah.
over time eh, you're going to be building that staircase of
Yes.
quick wins to shift into the strategic role that you obviously have espoused during
Yes.
our conversation.
Yes.
Um, what sort of support is there from the senior leadership for this?
Well, there's enormous support. So coming in, I took about 6 weeks and just did a listening tour with our executives, our senior leaders, a lot of our director level folks. And every single time I met with someone, they were like, oh my gosh, we've needed this so bad for so long. I think one of the things that prompted them to invest in this is their engagement survey. There's a professional learning and development question on their engagement survey, and they just saw a trend over time that that's something that their employees wanted. And I
Hmm.
think that's something that I've seen in other organizations that I've been in too. Employees are asking for more development. They want to develop in their careers. And I think our executives listen and are really trying to invest in our people.
So it's an important employee retention piece as well as career development.
Absolutely. I think it's a retention piece, it's an engagement piece. One of the great things about Andrews is we have a very tenured workforce. So our turnover is not super high because the culture is great. And so we have people that have been in the same roles for a very long time. And they want to stay in those roles. A lot of them want to stay in those roles. So how do we keep them learning and engaged and able to help us take the business into the future,
Hmm.
at the same time developing the people who want to move into different roles for with those different skills. So
That makes sense to me, especially with your earlier comment about your team and the cross training. It seems to me that there may be some cross training opportunities in the programs that you're building.
yeah, absolutely. And one of the programs that they did have before I came on was a rotational program, and bringing in college hires, having them rotate throughout the business to figure out like where their skill set lies and where the business needs. And I think it just gives them a broader perspective of the business at large, so that as they move into their permanent roles, that they are making decisions based on their broader scale knowledge of the company. And so I think that's something that we will look to expand across, the entire enterprise.
Hmm. And that may be a rapid expansion given the interest that you're fellow employees at Andrews have in this kind of training?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the challenges that I'm facing is because there is so much executive support and there is so much desire from the frontline employees, and there's so much that needs to be done. Prioritizing what we're going to do and what we can do, honestly, I think is going to be one of my biggest challenges, and figuring that out and then executing quickly on it.
Okay. Um, you know, a couple of things come to mind. In a strong culture like that, collaboration among the employees or coaches is already evident.
Yes.
Um, communication is communication something that you emphasize in, or you think you'll be emphasizing in the programs that you're developing?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think communication is one of our core values, right? Like that we communicate well. And so I think it's going to be super important. I think where we are a very collaborative company, um, there are still silos that we need to
Hmm.
break down. And so, just from a perspective of, we have 6 different locations across Texas, and each location kind of has their own way of doing things, right? And
Hmm.
so one of the challenges that my team is going to have, along with, setting up some documentation, is, we have this location's way of doing things, this location's way of doing things, and so on. We have to create the Andrews way.
Hmm.
And to be able to do that, we are going to have everybody come into a room to collaborate, talk about best practices, and figure out what do we want to say is the Andrews way, and then communicate that back out to our teams and potentially train them on what the Andrews way looks like. Um, and I think that's going to be a huge win for the organization.
Hmm. Um, and that's a great brand to have for the culture and the way Andrews operates.
Yeah.
Um, the there must be a lot of buy-in for this already.
There is, at the executive level. So I'm kind of giving you a sneak peek. Like, these are some of the things that I've just been thinking about as I'm new in my role. I'm putting together a strategy of how all of this is going to work over the next 2 to 3 years and what our roadmap looks like. Um, but there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of buy-in. I think from a change perspective, the the hard change is going to come from the tenured employees that have always done things this way, and how do we help them along in the change curve to be open to potentially doing things a different way.
Hmm. Yeah, change management is fun. It can be a little
Mhm.
scary.
Mhm.
Um, but bringing all the stakeholders together and just talking out the the differences may help people realize that the differences really aren't that great.
Right.
Um,
And and I do think, we need to leave room for some personalization, I'll call it, that each location is going to have some things that are unique to that location. But let's figure out what the 80% is
mhm,
and get that standardized and consistent, and then leave the 20% for them to do what they need to do to run their
mhm.
business.
Preserve the flavor of each
Yes.
region
Yes.
while getting buy-in and for understanding the Andrews way.
Right.
Um, and that may lead to some cost savings for Andrews as a whole. Um, may lead to better efficiency.
Yes. And that's one of the kind of benefits that we're doing is to
Okay. Um, let's see. So where do you see this all going in the future? Let's go 3 years down the road. What's your ideal state?
Yeah, well, so I've built out a maturity model of all of the things that I want to accomplish from a learning and development standpoint. My end goal is to build the learning of culture. And so you take that learning of culture and that culture of learning, and you build it backwards, where right now we are a compliance based learning and development team.
Hmm.
Um, my next step is to build out, what does our strategy look like? The next step is to become a strategic partner with the business. And how do we align with business goals and show value to the business that we are, doing the things that we just talked about, the productivity, the effectiveness and efficiency. And then along those lines, like, we're improving our metric capabilities, we're improving our marketing capabilities, we're improving, our consultative capabilities within the learning and development function.
Yes, the consultation aspect is important. And it really is part of being a trusted partner of,
Hmm.
not only the regions, but each of the administrative units.
Right.
Um, because, Andrews as a learning organization has already bought in to the idea of continuous improvement. And earlier, when you said learning of culture and culture of learning, those two go hand in hand.
Yeah.
There's a lot of learning that has to happen in change management, even if they're,
Yes.
subtle changes or just adjustments to an overall cultural shift.
Yeah. And while there is not a culture of learning right now, the culture that we do have of being people centric, it lines up so nicely with the work that we want to do. And we're positioning it as, we're investing in our people and we want you to stay here. We want you to grow with the company. We know our business is not going to look the same in 2 to 3 years as it does today. And being more future focused around, what are the skills that we need to be able to move our business into the future, and then how do we upskill our folks or reskill our folks to be able to meet the business need, so that we can promote internally. We don't always have to go outside to get the talent that we need. And I think that's where the culture of learning comes in.
Hmm. And you know, Andrews must be a desirable place to work.
It is.
You know,
Yes.
I'm guessing that Andrews ranks pretty high on, most admired companies and best place to work and those kinds of polls.
Yes, we have won some best place to work awards, and I think it's a testament to the leadership of our executive team and their care and concern that they have for all of our employees. It is a private family owned company, and the family is very generous to our employees and genuinely wants to take care of them. So I think
Mhm.
that's very unique.
Yeah, especially now. Um,
Yes.
there are the number of family-owned companies may have decreased during this time of, mergers and acquisitions,
Yes.
and just the rise of large national and international enterprises. So it's heartening to hear that these companies are doing well.
Yes, and we are actually growing. So we just acquired another distributorship in Laredo a couple of months ago, and so we are continuing to grow.
Mhm.
And I think, we have a differentiator among other distributors in Texas. And our differentiator, number one, is our people, but number two is most distributors are logistics companies. They get the product from point A to point B. Andrews has differentiated themselves as a brand builder. So not only do we get the product from point A to point B, but we also have care and concern for your product, and we want to help your product grow. And so, most of the beer and spirits companies want to come to us because they want to sell more of their product, and we want to help them do that.
And the value proposition you've described with learning and development really becoming a strategic enabler of Andrews is, I think Andrews is going to pick up even more distributors, not only in Texas, but maybe in other states.
I would hope so. I think the goal is for us to continue to grow, and we want to be able to offer the products that our customers want at the time that they need them, at the time that they want them. So, as our customer preferences change, we will change with them.
Anything else that comes to mind as we wrap up today's session?
I think the only other thing that I would say is that in the space of learning and development, I think there are a lot of distractions right now. With all of the stuff going around about AI, a lot of the stuff going around about skills, and there's hundreds of vendors trying to say, hey, I have this product that's going to solve all of your problems. And I would just encourage people who are in this space, yes, some of those things, as your company is ready for them, they will make sense. But I think for a lot of us, and I've talked to a lot of my peers in large organizations, but we have to but we have to prepare our organizations to be mature enough to take on some of those things. And I've gotten my nose bloodied enough times trying to implement things that were the new shiny thing before the company was ready for it. And so I think that would be something that I would just say to all of my peers out there of really assess before you go on to the new shiny thing of what is the company ready for, and really understanding the value that it's going to bring to the company before trying to go into some of those endeavors.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing the time today with us, Angie. I hope our listeners and viewers, if you've got questions, feel free to put them in the comments and we will follow up with you. Thanks again for joining us today on The Perfect Route.
Thanks you.